The night was cold and silent across the junk plains of Xeron 9. Mark, a human scavenger, walked alone through piles of metal and broken starships. He lived on the edge of the scrapyard zone, collecting old tech and parts to sell. It was a lonely life, but it kept him alive, until that night. When everything changed, his scanner beeped, a soft, strange signal appeared on the screen. Weak life signs. Very faint. That didn't make sense. No one lived out there. He almost ignored it, but something inside told him to check it. Mark followed the signal across the wreckage. A large alien ship lay half buried in the dirt, its walls torn by blast marks. It looked like it had crashed months ago. Still, the signal was coming from. Inside, he climbed through the broken hull, moving carefully. Dust floated in the air like ghosts. He held up his flashlight, shining it down a corridor full of debris. Suddenly, he heard a soft cry. Like a whimper, small and scared, Mark froze. "Hello?" he called, voice low. No answer. Just silence. Then, another soft sound, like two tiny breaths hiding in fear. He followed the sound to a small room near the back. Under a shattered table, wrapped in old blankets, two small figures crouched together. Their eyes glowed faint blue in the dark. Alien children, thin and trembling. One looked around 6 years old, the other maybe 10. When they saw him, they didn't scream. They just stared, wide-eyed. Then the older one whispered something. "Theron." Mark blinked. "What?" The younger one reached out a small hand. "Theron," she said again, her voice shaking. Mark didn't understand the word, but the way they looked at him, it hit something deep inside. He knelt down slowly, showing he had no weapon. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice softer now. The older one shook her head, but her eyes were wet with tears. "Hungry," she said, struggling with the human word. "Cold." Mark nodded. He gave them a protein bar from his jacket. They ate. Like they hadn't seen food in days, his heart ached. He wrapped his coat around them both. "I'll get you out of here," he said quietly. But deep in his gut, he felt something wasn't right. As he turned to leave, he heard a noise, distant, outside the wreck. Voices, low and sharp, speaking in another language. Mark carefully peeked through a crack in the wall. 3 figures in black armor moved through the scrap, holding scanners. They weren't scavengers. They were soldiers, hunters, and they were looking for someone. Mark's heart raced. He looked at the girls, who now clung to his legs in fear. "Are they after you?" he asked. The older girl nodded slowly, tears falling down her cheek. Mark had a choice. Walk away and let fate handle it, or take the risk and save them. He looked at them again, thin arms, glowing eyes, calling him something like father. Even though they didn't know him, they trusted him, and somehow that meant everything. "Okay," he whispered, picking them up gently. "Hold on to me. We're going to run." He crept out of the wreck, holding both girls close. His boots made no sound as he moved between piles of scrap. The soldier's light scanned nearby metal walls. A voice shouted, "They must be here. Scan again." Mark ducked behind a fallen engine block. The girls pressed their faces into his chest, silent and afraid. He waited until the lights passed, then sprinted across the dark plains toward his old hideout. He had no idea what they were or why people were hunting them, but tonight, 2 alien girls had looked at a lonely human and called him father, and somehow, in his heart, he felt like one. He didn't know it yet, but that night, the Empire began to turn. Mark ran through the cold night with the 2 alien girls clinging to him. His boots hit the dirt hard, his breath came fast. Behind them, shadows moved through the scrapyard. They were not just soldiers, they were trackers, trained to hunt without rest. The older girl, Sela, kept looking over her shoulder. She whispered something in her language, and the younger one, Yari, tightened her grip around Mark's neck. Mark didn't know what they were saying, but he could feel the fear. It was thick in the air like smoke. They reached the hidden tunnel entrance under a pile of old engines. Mark kicked the hatch open, climbed down fast, and pulled it shut above them. His hideout wasn't big, but it was safe. at least for now. The tunnel led to a small underground room, filled with scrap tech and battery lights. It used to be an old miner's shelter. Now it was his home. He dropped to one knee, gently placing the girls on a blanket. "Safe," he said, breathing hard. "You're safe now?" The girls looked around, confused but calm. Yari found a heating lamp and held her hands near it. Sela sat close, never taking her eyes off the tunnel door. Mark grabbed a ration pack and handed it to them. Sela spoke slowly, her words rough but clear. "You, not like others." Mark blinked. "What others?" "The men. The black armor. They say we must vanish," she said. Her eyes shimmered. Like moonlight, Yari pointed to a small scar on her wrist. "It hurt," she whispered. "They say we are wrong." Mark didn't understand. Why would someone chase two small children like this? He sat beside them, rubbing his tired face. "What are you?" he finally asked. "Why are they after you?" Sela looked down, silent. Then she whispered, "We are heirs." Mark frowned. "Heirs? To what?" Sela looked up, eyes burning. The throne of Zephyria. The name meant nothing to him, at first, but he had heard old stories. An empire, lost in a civil war, a royal bloodline said to be wiped out. Yari reached into her small cloak and pulled out a small glowing crystal. It pulsed softly, like a heartbeat. "Mother gave," she said. "When the fire came, she told us to run." Mark stared at the crystal. It wasn't just tech. It was alive. Something deep inside it whispered. Even though it made no sound, suddenly a loud buzz filled the room. Mark's warning sensors lit up. Someone was scanning the surface. He grabbed an old viewing lens and peeked up through the tunnel's ceiling cam. The black-armored soldiers were back. They moved slowly, scanning each pile of metal with blinking red lights. One of them said, "The royal signal was active again. They must be close." Mark's blood turned cold. He turned to the girls. "We have to go," he said. "But where?" Sela asked, clutching Yari close. "There's an old shuttle buried deeper in the East Ridge," Mark said. "If we reach it, maybe I can get it working." He packed quick. Water, food, battery cells, and an old blaster. The girls followed. Silent, but something about them had changed. They no longer looked scared, they looked ready. They climbed through side tunnels heading east. The way was dark, tight, full of dust. At one point they had to crawl under a collapsed beam. Mark helped them through, then stopped. A sound. Something was crawling behind them, slow and steady. He raised his blaster, light shaking. A black drone appeared from the dark, its red eye glowing. Yari gasped. The drone turned to scan them, too late. Yari raised her hand and her fingers sparkled with light. The drone fizzed, shook, and exploded into sparks. Mark stared, speechless. "You did that?" he asked. Yari looked shy, nodding slowly. "She is dream-touched," Sela said. "Our blood has old power." Mark didn't know what to say. He had found two scared girls. But they were something more. They were powerful, hunted, and part of something ancient. They kept moving. Hours passed. The sky above turned deep purple as morning neared. Finally, they reached the East Ridge. Buried under metal and vines was the old shuttle. Rusted, broken, but still whole. Mark dropped to his knees, wiping dust from its door. "I don't know if this thing will fly," he said, "but it might get us away." The girls stood beside him, holding each other's hands. "We trust you, Theron," Sela said. That word again. Mark had learned it now. In their language, it meant more than father. It meant protector, guardian, chosen one. He looked out toward the shadows behind them. He knew they wouldn't stop, but something inside him had changed too. He wasn't just running anymore. He was protecting. And somehow, he knew this was only the beginning. The old shuttle groaned as Mark pulled open its rusty hatch. Dust blew out, thick and dry. Inside, broken panels sparked with weak energy. The lights flickered like dying stars, but the core was still intact. "It might still work," Mark whispered, more to himself than anyone. The alien girl stood beside him, quiet but watching every move. Sela looked serious, her sharp eyes scanning the shuttle's control room. Yari held her glowing crystal tightly, as if afraid it might vanish. Mark climbed into the pilot seat, brushing aside cobwebs and broken wires. He connected a power cell from his pack to the console. Sparks jumped, then the screen blinked to life. Old alien symbols flashed across the screen. He didn't understand them, but Sela did. She stepped forward and touched the screen. The system instantly changed, now showing maps, systems, ancient routes across the galaxy. Mark's jaw dropped. "You can read that?" Sela nodded slowly. "It is in the royal tongue," she said softly. "Mother taught us." Yari walked to a side panel and placed her crystal in a small circular port. The shuttle hummed, deep and strong. A soft light spread across the room. A message blinked on the console. "Crown link active, royal blood detected." Mark stared at the screen. "What did you do?" Yari looked up with wide eyes. "I only gave it my light," she said. "Now, it remembers." Then came the sound. Ping, 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 the signal. It wasn't just a local one. It was galactic, deep, and powerful. The shuttle had just sent out a beacon, one not heard in over 100 years. Mark tried to shut it down. "Stop. They'll track this." But it was too late. The beacon had already gone out. Into the stars, into the hidden systems, into the bones of old empires. Far away, across dead star routes, machines awoke. Long-dead satellites blinked on, scanning. The stars, ancient databanks buried in cold moons, spoke again. The message was clear. The bloodline lives. Back inside the shuttle, the girls stood still. They were listening, not with ears, but with something deeper. Sela held her head, her voice trembling. "They are coming." Mark froze. "Who?" "The crown's children," she whispered. "Those who sleep, and those who remember." Mark felt sweat on his neck. He never believed in the old stories. Stories about ancient alien empires, bloodlines, royal powers. But now he stood inside one of those stories, and he didn't know the ending. He grabbed his pack and began checking the shuttle's engines. If they had only minutes before someone came, he had to make this ship fly. The engines coughed when powered, but sparks flew out the side. Mark swore under his breath. "We'll need time," he muttered. "Maybe an hour, if we're lucky." Suddenly, Yari touched the ship's wall. Her small fingers glowed with blue light. The shuttle responded, its metal shifting slightly. The engines purred as if healed. Mark looked at her, stunned. "What did you just do?" She smiled shyly. "The ship knows us." As the engines warmed, the scanner beeped again. This time louder. Mark checked the display. Multiple ships had just changed course, heading straight for Xeron 9. Some were old warships, marked with royal emblems, others unknown, dark shapes with no signal. Not all who heard the beacon were allies. Mark turned to the girls. "We have to move soon," he said. "This place is about to become a war zone." Sela didn't flinch. Instead, she walked to the control panel and activated a star map. A system blinked far across the stars, highlighted in gold. "What's that?" Mark asked. "The throne world," she answered. "It waits for us." Yari whispered something strange. "The throne dreams of us," she said. It never forgot. Mark stared at the golden system on the screen. It was just a name in old stories. Zephyrian, the heart of the old empire. No one had found it in decades. Now 2 small girls claimed it was calling them home. Suddenly the shuttle shook. Explosions above. The hunters were back. Mark grabbed the pilot seat. "Strap in! We're leaving now!" He fired the thrusters, lifting the shuttle out of the ground. The roof split open as the engines roared. The night sky lit up as enemy drones chased them through the air. Laser blasts missed by inches. Yari pressed her hands to the dashboard. Again, energy pulsed out, creating a shield around the ship. The blasts faded away. Mark gunned the engines harder, heading for the stars. The 2 girls sat beside him, calm. Behind them, the world of scrap and rust fell away. Ahead of them, destiny waited. Mark didn't know if he believed in fate, but somehow, he believed in them. The stars looked peaceful, but Mark's heart was not. He flew the shuttle fast through dark space, moving from system to system without resting. The BC, two alien girls, Sela and Yari, sat quietly behind him, their small hands gripping the seat straps. They trusted him completely. He didn't know why that trust mattered so much, but it did. Each day they traveled farther from the scrapyard planet. Each night Mark repaired what he could on the old shuttle. It was working better now thanks to Yari's strange touch. Her fingers could fix things without tools, just light, energy, and focus. Mark checked the star map again. They were halfway to the system Sela called Throne World, a golden system hidden behind cosmic storms, forgotten by many. If the girls really were royal heirs, that world might hold the answers, but danger followed them through the stars. Mark needed help. His fuel was low and he didn't trust space stations. Then he remembered someone. An old contact. Someone he had saved once, Jenna, a smuggler who owed him her life. If anyone could refuel the shuttle without questions, it was her. He sent a message. Within an hour, she replied, "Meet me at Sargon Drift, Dock 13, quiet place. Bring credits." Mark smiled for the first time in days. "She'll help," he told the girls. "She's a friend," but Sela didn't smile. She looked at Yari, then back at Mark. "Are you sure?" Mark nodded. "I saved her once, pulled her ship out of a gravity trap. She won't forget that." They landed on Sargon Drift, a small trade outpost hidden in the curve of a moon. Old ships lined the dock, and flickering lights hung. Above the airlocks, Jenna stood waiting, arms crossed, her silver coat shining. She looked just like Mark remembered. "Still flying junk?" she teased with a grin. Mark chuckled. "Still scamming rich tourists?" They laughed, and for a moment it felt like old times. Then Jenna saw the girls. Her smile faded. "Who are they?" "Long story," Mark said. "I need fuel and maybe a new transponder." Jenna raised a brow. "Running from someone?" Mark didn't answer. They followed Jenna through back corridors to her shop. It smelled like oil and hot metal. The girls stayed close to Mark, quiet and watchful. Jenna gave him fuel cells and parts. Mark handed over his last stash of trade gems. She looked at the payment, then smiled strangely. "More than fair," she said. "But I need to make a call real quick." She stepped into a side room and closed the door. Sela pulled on Mark's sleeve. "She's lying." Mark frowned. "What do you mean?" "She's calling someone bad," Yari whispered. "I feel it." Mark's heart pounded. He walked to the door and put his ear against it. He heard Jenna's voice, low and sharp. "Yes, I have them. The royal girls and the man who has them calls himself their father." Mark froze. His blood turned cold. She had betrayed them. Suddenly, alarms blared across the station. "Security lockdown," a voice called out. "Unknown royal energy detected." Jenna came out holding a stun gun. "Sorry, Mark," she said, "but they're worth more than you can imagine." Mark stepped in front of the girls. "You were my friend," he growled. Jenna shook her head. "This is business, and I need credits more than loyalty." Before she could fire, the room filled with light, blue and gold. Yari raised her hands, her eyes glowing. The gun melted in Jenna's grip. Sela moved her hand, and Jenna dropped to her knees, unable to breathe. "Run!" Mark shouted, grabbing the girls. They sprinted back through the hall. Security bots rushed in from both sides, but Mark fired his old blaster, clearing the way. They reached the shuttle, launched fast, and blasted out of the docking bay. Explosions shook the station behind them. They escaped, but barely. In the silence that followed, Mark sat in the pilot seat, shaking. His heart was heavy, not just with fear, but sadness. He had trusted Jenna. Now he knew. There were few people in the galaxy who could be trusted. He turned to the girls. "I'm sorry," he said. Sela took his hand. "You didn't fail," she said softly. "You believed." Yari sat close to him, leaning against his arm. "They want us gone," she said. "But the throne wants us home." Mark looked at the stars ahead. He knew the beacon they sent had awakened old powers, both good and evil. And now the path to the throne would be even more dangerous, but something had changed in him too. He was no longer just a scavenger, he was their protector, and maybe, just maybe, he was part of something greater than he had ever imagined. The stars had grown quiet again. After escaping Sargon Drift, Mark set a new course toward the ancient system marked in gold on the shuttle's map. The girls called it Zephyrian. It was deep in uncharted space, far from any patrol routes or colonies. To most, it was only a myth, but to Sela and Yari, it was home. Days passed as they traveled through strange, dark regions. Twisted nebulae, broken moons, and forgotten ruins floated silently past the ship. Mark had never flown so far from the known systems, but the closer they came, the more alive the girls became. Sela began to hum songs Mark didn't understand. Old royal melodies passed from mother to daughter. Yari kept touching the walls of the shuttle, whispering to it. And the shuttle responded. Lights glowed softly wherever her fingers moved. It was like the ship knew it was carrying something sacred. Then one day the stars shifted and a storm opened. Not a natural storm, but a pocket of energy shielding the throne world. The shuttle slowed as it entered the eye of the storm. There, in the middle of black clouds and gold lightning, floated a planet unlike any Mark had seen, Zephyrian. A world of marble towers and overgrown thrones. It looked both dead and alive. Ruins spread across the surface, but at the heart of it stood a massive golden structure, the throne temple. They landed gently in a quiet valley, surrounded by giant stone statues. Each statue held a sword pointing to the sky, their faces worn by time. Mark stepped out with the girls, the ground beneath them glowing with each footstep. "This place is ancient," he whispered. Sela nodded. "The heart of our people," she said. "It called us back." They followed a glowing path toward the golden structure. Doors opened by themselves, as if welcoming them. Inside was silence, deep and holy. The air felt heavy, yet peaceful. At the center stood a throne made of crystal and gold. It shimmered as if breathing. On the throne was no one, but the room was not empty. As the girls stepped forward, the walls came alive. Holograms appeared, tall, regal figures with glowing eyes. They bowed slowly and spoke in one voice. "The royal line returns." Mark stepped back, watching in awe. Sela walked to the throne without fear. She reached out, and the throne pulsed with golden light. A voice echoed, old and warm. "Blood accepted." Yari followed and placed her crystal in the center of the throne. The entire hall lit up with stars. Holograms of lost cities, fleets, and royal archives flickered across the walls. Then came the Guardians, machines built of silver and energy. They rose from the floor like statues awakening from sleep. Each one knelt before the girls. "Queens reborn," they said. "We serve." Mark couldn't believe his eyes. He had found them in a wreck, two scared, starving children. Now he was watching them take their place on a throne that had waited for generations. The girls sat together on the wide seat, the light wrapping. Around them, it didn't look like a weapon. It looked like protection. And in that moment, Mark felt something stir in him. He turned to leave, unsure where he now belonged. But Yari called out, "Don't go, Theron." Sela stood too. "You found us, you saved us, you belong here too." Before he could answer, an alert blinked across the throne's control panel. Ships, many, were approaching Zephyrian. Some carried royal symbols, others did not. Mark walked up beside them. Friends or enemies? Sela looked at the readings. "Some come to swear loyalty," she said. "Others, to destroy." The throne was not just a seat. It was a beacon. It had called to the stars. And now the stars were answering. Yari leaned close to Mark. "They will ask who raised us," she whispered. "We will say it was you." Mark swallowed hard. He had never been more than a loner, a junk man drifting through forgotten places. But now, he was at the center of something ancient, something powerful, and the Empire was watching. Sela turned to the holograms. "Prepare the gates," she said. "Let those who come in peace enter. Let the traitors meet the flame." The Guardians responded, moving to their posts. Swords of light activated, shields formed over the temple. Mark took a deep breath. He had protected them this far. Now he would help protect their crown. As the throne room filled with the sounds of returning power, Mark knew something else. This throne had waited, not just for the royal blood, but for someone strong enough to carry them through the fire, and somehow it had waited for him too. The golden throne of Zephyrian pulsed with power. Selah and Yari sat side by side, small but unshaken. Mark stood behind them like a silent wall, his hands resting on a railing. Outside, ships began to arrive, slowly at first, then faster. From every corner of the stars, vessels shaped like birds, claws, and old royal shields dropped from hyperspace. The sky above the temple filled with color, with light, and with tension. Some came in peace, others with guns primed. The throne's signal had been heard across the forgotten empire, and now the test of loyalty had begun. Selah raised her hand. The throne responded, projecting her image in the sky above Zephyrian. Her voice echoed across space, soft but unbreakable. To all houses, to all fleets, to all who remember, your queens have returned. Ships across space paused. Soldiers froze at their posts. Old commanders stared at the image with disbelief in their eyes. Yari's voice followed. We were not lost, we were hidden. Now we rise. Across the galaxy, divided worlds buzzed with chatter. In royal courts, advisors panicked. In rebel bunkers, leaders shouted in fear. In the pirate sector of Kalzoon, Reach, a warlord, dropped his glass. Impossible, he whispered. They were dead. On the moon-ruled world of Grethar, an old admiral fell to his knees. The bloodline lives, he said. The empire is not gone. Some knelt. Some prepared. Weapons? But no one ignored it. Back on Zephyrian, Mark walked beside the throne. I think you just woke a sleeping beast, he said. Selah nodded. The empire was never dead, she said. It was waiting. A large ship landed outside the temple. Gates. The Guardian scanned it. It showed no threat. A single woman stepped out, cloaked in blue. She approached slowly and knelt before the girls. I am Lady Vera of House Illerith, she said. We swore to serve the crown. We kept the promise, Selah stood. You remember your oath? The woman nodded, tears in her eyes. The stars turned dark, but we never stopped watching. More followed. House after house arrived. Nobles, warriors, old bloodlines that had gone into hiding. They came forward, one by one, kneeling before. The two girls and calling them your highnesses, but not all were loyal. In orbit, a dark fleet had arrived. No royal symbols, no banners, only war paint. They called themselves the Ash Rain. A faction that had ruled the scattered systems during the fall. They did not come to kneel. They came to destroy. Inside the temple, alarms flashed. Mark looked at the scanner. 17 ships, he said. Weapons locked. Yari looked calm. They hate what we are, she whispered, because the crown never chose them. Mark looked at her. You think the throne will protect you? Selah turned her gaze to him. No, she said. You will. He blinked, surprised. Me? Selah nodded. You didn't run when we were nothing. You stayed when no one else believed. The throne listens to blood, but it answers to loyalty. Mark felt the weight of those words. He wasn't a soldier, he wasn't a king, but somehow he had become more than he ever imagined. He turned to the throne's console. It showed ancient defense systems, planetary shields, weapon satellites. Fighter drones, most were offline, forgotten, buried, but one button blinked green. Manual defense activation. Mark pressed it. The ground outside trembled. Towers across the valley cracked open and sleek silver drones rose into the sky. Cannons awakened from sleep, pointing to the heavens. The crown had teeth again. The Ash Rain sent their message. Step down or burn. Selah stood tall on the throne. We will not step down, she said. This world belongs to the line of truth. Mark looked at the approaching ships, then back at the girls. Let's make history, he said, smiling. The battle began. Blue fire lit the skies. Enemy ships launched attacks, but the temple's shield held strong. Drones danced between beams of energy, protecting the throne with deadly grace. Mark directed the defense with sharp focus. He had never commanded an army before, but the throne seemed to guide his hands, like it trusted him too. Hours passed. Ships burned and crashed. Finally, the ash rain broke and fled. The skies went silent. The stars watched, and the girls still sat on the throne. Sela looked at Mark. "Do you know what this means?" He nodded slowly. "You're no longer hunted," he said. "You're rulers." Yari took his hand. "No," she said gently. "We're family." In that golden hall, in the center of a reborn empire, the galaxy remembered, and the name of a human, once just a scavenger, was whispered across the stars. Thoran, the protector, the father of queens. The battle was over. Ashrain's ships had fled into the void. Smoke still drifted across the upper atmosphere of Zephyrian, but the golden throne stood untouched, shining beneath the twin moons. Mark walked through the quiet hall, blaster still. At his side, guards bowed to him now, not just out of respect, but loyalty. He was no longer a stranger on a junk world. He had become something else, something greater. Even if he didn't ask for it, Sela and Yari sat on the steps of the throne, not high and mighty, but calm, quiet, watching. They still wore the simple clothes they'd had since he found them. Even now, with power in their hands, they hadn't changed who they were inside. "Everyone's waiting," Mark said, stopping near them. "The Royal Council, the nobles, the media feeds, they all want a statement." Sela looked up. "They want a queen's voice," she said, "but we want your heart." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Is that your way of asking me to speak?" Yari giggled and ran over, taking his hand. "Say something nice," she said. "Something like a father would say." That word again, father. He had never been one, never thought he would be. But they had chosen him, and now, the whole galaxy watched as the man they called Thoran stepped forward. He walked to the center of the hall where floating cameras waited. His face appeared on screens across starships, colonies, and ancient cities. He stood silent for a moment, thinking of how far they'd come. Then he spoke. "I found 2 girls hiding in the wreck of a forgotten ship. They were cold, scared, and hunted. I didn't know who they were, but they called me father and I couldn't walk away." Crowds across the galaxy listened. Mark continued. "They are queens now, yes, but to me they're still the little ones who trusted a nobody. They've survived pain, betrayal, and war, and yet they still show kindness, still forgive, still dream." He paused, then looked directly into the camera. "If this galaxy is to be ruled again, let it be ruled by love, not fear. Let power rise not from blood alone, but from those who protect the weak." Sela and Yari watched. From the throne steps, their eyes wet. Mark turned back and walked toward them. The girls stood, and as he reached them, they each took one of his hands. The holograms showed the image to billions, 2 glowing-eyed queens holding the hands of the man who saved them. That image would be carved into statues, painted on royal halls, and remembered in history books. It was not just a return of power, it was the rebirth of hope. Later that night, as the temple lights dimmed, Mark sat alone on a balcony. He looked at the stars, wondering how a junk scavenger had ended up here. He didn't want gold, didn't care about titles. He just wanted the girls to be safe. Sela walked out and sat beside him. "You still don't see it," she said gently. "See what?" "You're not just someone who helped us," she said. "You're part of us." Yari came after, carrying a small crown. It was different from the royal ones, simpler, made from ship metal. She placed it on Mark's head and smiled. "This is yours," she whispered. "You are king of hearts." Mark laughed, shaking his head. "I'm not a king." "To us you are," Sela said. "And to those who follow us, you will always be the man who stood when others ran." Down below, fleets realigned under the royal banner. Old enemies sent messages of peace. Some still planned rebellion, but now they feared the throne, because it wasn't empty anymore. In the weeks that followed, Mark was offered power, land, titles. He refused most of it. He chose instead to stay close to the girls, to guide them, protect them, raise them like a real father should. When someone tried to assassinate Sela, it was Mark who jumped between her and the blast. When Yari fell sick from energy overload, it was Mark who stayed at her side through the night. He became more than a guardian. He became their heart. And so, the Empire was reborn, not through fire or blood, but through a bond between a broken human and two lost royal daughters. He had given them safety, and they had given him purpose. One day, during a ceremony attended by leaders from across the galaxy, Yari took the stage and spoke just one line. "We are the daughters of Zephyrian, but before we were queens, we were his." She pointed to Mark, who stood quietly at the back. The entire hall rose and bowed, not to the crown but to the man who earned their respect. And so, in the songbooks of the stars, they were not remembered alone. They were remembered together, the lost queens, and the human father who made the Empire kneel